Hello everybody, it's my practice to normally give a shiur in shul on Pesach, on Yom Tov, to do with the laws of Pesach, but unfortunately, as we all know, that's not going to be possible this year. Therefore, I thought I might make a halachic shiur for a video, and that's what this is all about. I'm going to be looking at one of the contemporary issues of the Seder, which has come up this year in particular, which is the idea of having a Seder on Zoom. This is to accommodate the needs of elderly or isolated people, and such people can often not get out of the home and miss their family. We also have a situation of ill and elderly people who can't wait till nightfall to start the Seder, because starting at 8:26, which is the time for the first Seder in London this year, is simply too late. So I wanted to work through these two issues. First of all, the halachic position regarding projecting a Seder on Yom Tov by Zoom, and also what we can do to help people who find nightfall too late as a starting point for the Seder. So first of all, let's talk about the Zoom Seder. There's been much talk about it, and there are some rabbis in Israel who permit it, because of the extreme circumstances that we're in with the coronavirus and the distress that is occasioned by isolation and illness. However, the chief rabbi and the London Beth Din and many other authorities do not permit the Seder to be relayed on Yom Tov by Zoom. The halachic foundations for this prohibition are not entirely clear, but are likely to be associated with the prohibition of writing, which is a Torah prohibition on Shabbat and Yom Tov. Rambam in Hilchot Shabbat says that this applies not only to writing words, but also to making a picture. In addition, when we're using Zoom to communicate with people, there is the problem of transmitting a sound, which will be relayed to the recipient's device. And this is also a problem on Shabbat and Yom Tov, as the rabbis say that we're not allowed to create a sound except in a very meaningless way. So, for example, if somebody happens to tap along to a song, then that might be permitted, or if they tap a glass for silence, that may be permitted. But to go so far as to project a voice electronically is not permitted on Shabbat or Yom Tov, and that is a rabbinic prohibition. It is likely that the prohibition against writing, when applied to Zoom, is also only a rabbinic thing, because it's not a permanent picture that is being projected. It's only a thing that changes and will go after a short time. However, even temporary writing, so for example, writing something in the steam on a mirror in a steamy room, is also not permitted by rabbinic law on Shabbat and Yom Tov. So what about the fact that when we have Zoom, one isn't actually pressing any buttons or doing anything directly to interact with the system? After all, you're just appearing in front of it. So it's not like you're taking a pen and writing letters or painting a picture with a paintbrush. This is far less a direct interaction with the system. All one is doing is appearing in front of a camera, and the picture appears on the recipient's screen by itself. Is that permitted? So the facts on the ground are that actually it isn't. This connection between the person appearing in front of the camera and the recipient's screen showing their image showing their image to the viewer is a psik resha, which means it is an inevitable consequence of something which is not in itself a prohibited action. So, for example, if somebody walks in front of a house which has a security light on it, and all they wish to do is walk along the road in front of this house, it is permitted for them to do that on Shabbat or Yom Tov, even if the light will definitely come on. And this is because it's what's known as a psik resha delo nichale. It is an inevitable consequence of an action, but it's not a consequence that one wants. One doesn't actually care if the light goes on in front of somebody's house, because that's only a facility for the house owner or the guests as they walk up the driveway which the light shines on. However, for somebody walking past in the street, it's not reasonable to say that the light is a help for them, and therefore it is permitted to walk past a house on Shabbat or Yom Tov, even if we know that doing so will turn on a light. However, if somebody walks up the driveway of that house and makes the light come on, whether they're the house owner or a guest, that would be a problem halachically, because it is a pesik reisha denichale. It is an inevitable consequence of one's walking up the driveway, and one wants that consequence to happen. And the rule is that a pesik reisha denichale, a desirable consequence of something which is an inevitable consequence of an innocent action, is not allowed, even if it's only a rabbinic prohibition. Likewise, with the Zoom situation, we have exactly this. The whole point of setting up Zoom is that one wants one's voice to be heard and one's image to appear on the recipient screen. And this is a psik reisha denichale. It is an inevitable consequence that one wants to happen, and that is forbidden even when all the actions involved are only forbidden by rabbinic law, such as making one's image appear on the screen and making one's voice be heard in the recipient's device. Therefore, it is not allowed, according to the London Beth Din, the Chief Rabbi, and many others, to have a Zoom link operating on Yom Tov or Shabbat, even if one set up the computer beforehand, so one isn't actually pressing any buttons or so on Shabbat or Yom Tov itself. There are actually additional problems with using Zoom at the Seder. While we are allowed to answer Amen to a bracha that is heard electronically, it is very dubious in halacha whether one can actually have that bracha said for one. Rav Moshe Feinstein ruled that one may not hear the Megillah through a microphone on Purim, because when one hears the microphone sound, one isn't actually hearing the proper voice of the reader of the Megillah. Likewise, if one were to engage with the Seder through Zoom, one isn't really hearing the proper voice of the person who says the brachot. Therefore, one couldn't, for example, simply respond to Kiddush and have that Kiddush count for one. One would have to say every word of the Seder oneself, including the Haggadah, because one couldn't even use the device of Shomer Ka'oneh, that somebody who hears it is as if they said it themselves, because they're not hearing the proper voice. They're hearing a voice that is being introduced and transmitted through the Zoom system, and that is not called a proper hearing. It is likely that in practice people listening in on Zoom would find it very onerous to say every single word of the Seder themselves, and there is therefore a big risk that using Zoom in this way will not actually help the listeners to discharge the obligation, and it would make life very complicated. So bottom line is, not only is it forbidden to project or receive images with Zoom, it is also something that will create leading problems within the recipients as regards their discharging the obligation to attend a Seder and hear what's being said. Therefore, it is to be discouraged. The Chief Rabbi suggested going through parts of the Seder such as Halach Ma'anya, Manishtana, Dayenu, Halal and Chagadia for the enjoyment of being together online and sharing the experience. And he says that all concerned should then follow through the entire Seder from nightfall. And this, he doesn't need me to say it, is obviously a wonderful way forward. However, we have to bear in mind that there are some people who cannot or will not do a Seder starting at nightfall. It is quite late, it's 8:26 for start, and there are people who may be too ill or who just don't care about starting so late and putting themselves out and will want to start the Seder or need to start the Seder earlier. What can be done for such people? So there is actually an answer to this. The second volume of Shut B'Ma'eh HaBazak, a collection of modern rabbinic responsa, presents a question from a rabbi in Zurich who was asked how he might arrange a communal Seder for elderly people who, because of their poor health, could not wait until nightfall for the Seder to begin. And the answer given there goes through issues which are relevant to our situation as well. So the first source that we look at is the Mishnah Brura, who makes it clear that the Seder should not really start until nightfall. And here's what he says. Do not say that since it is meritorious to hurry to a mitzvah, one should hurry to begin Kiddush and the Haggadah while it is still daylight, as we find with Shabbat and Yom Tov, that one may add from the normal day onto the holy day. Regarding Pesach, it is not so, because eating matzah is compared to Pesach, as the Torah says, they shall eat the Pesach lamb on matzot and bitter herbs. And the Kaf HaChaim reiterates this in his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. And this is what the Kaf HaChaim says. Even if it will be nightfall before one finishes Magid and reaches the point for eating matzah and maror, nonetheless, the cup of wine at Kiddush, which is one of the 4 cups, and also the eating of karpas and the other different features that we have to prompt the children to ask questions, and all the more so the recitation of the Pesach story, need also to be at a time when it is appropriate to eat matzah and maror, because all these things are associated with matzah and maror. Therefore, the Kaf HaChaim backs up the Mishnah Brura, saying that the whole Seder should, in principle, only start at nightfall. Kiddush, the first part of the Seder, should only start at nightfall. However, the Kaf HaChaim mentions that there is some flexibility regarding this. And here's how he begins. If somebody made Kiddush while it was still daylight, and likewise, if somebody did the mitzvot of recounting the story of the Exodus and eating karpas while it was still daylight, they have discharged the obligation. But if they ate matzah and maror, which are compared to the Pesach lamb, before nightfall, then they have not fulfilled the obligation to eat them and must do so again after nightfall. This is the view of the Shulchan Gavua. It's the most lenient view that I could find, which says that one can do at least Kiddush and Karpas before nightfall. However, the Maharil says that one has only discharged one's obligation regarding Kiddush, but not the obligations to eat Karpas and the telling the story of the Exodus. And the Trumat Hadeshen and those who follow him say that one has not even fulfilled one's obligation to say Kiddush. So whereas the Shulchan Gavua says one can recount the story before nightfall, one can do Karpas and Kiddush before nightfall, the Trumat Hadeshen disagrees. And so does the Maharil. And therefore, the Kaf HaChaim concludes that specifically regarding Kiddush, we can say that one who does so before nightfall has fulfilled the obligation, because whenever there is a doubt about a bracha, we rule it should not be said again. Therefore, since somebody has already made Kiddush before nightfall and possibly has fulfilled the obligation with that Kiddush, we don't want to encourage them to say the bracha of Kiddush again. Also, he says, it's possible that Kiddush at the Seder has the same status as other Kiddushim throughout the year, which we can do before Shabbat and Yom Tov, unlike the Mishnah Brura, who says that it is part of the whole Pesach package that must be started at nightfall. However, the Kaf HaChaim concludes, regarding the eating of karpas and the mitzvah of saying the Haggadah, one must repeat them after nightfall. The Khatam Sofer goes so far as to say that it is actually perfectly admissible to have Kiddush said before nightfall, but nobody else says that. So, let's deal with the situation of somebody who is saying the Seder before nightfall for other people who need it said for them. As is often the case, we may have somebody who's very ill or elderly, and they just can't summon up the energy or the mental presence to do the Seder for themselves, and they need to have it said for them before nightfall, what then can one do? How far can one push it? So the rule is that the leader can say all the brachot of mitzvot for other people on their behalf, even the brachot to do with eating and drinking, and even though the leader does not wish to eat or drink themselves at this point. And thus it says in the Shulchan Aruch, if someone wants to say the brachot for other people at the Seder in 2 or 3 homes, they should say the brachot in their own home and eat all that is necessary, and say Birkat Hamazon, do the benching, and then repeat the brachot for each person in their own home, with the people in their homes drinking the cups of wine for Kiddush, and at the end of Magid, and eating the maror on a matzah. But the person going to the others' homes should not eat or drink anything, and they should leave them to finish their meals and do Birkat Hamazon. If the people in their own homes cannot say Birkat Hamazon, the person visiting them should say it with them word by word, and then go to the next home and do the same thing, then return home and finish Hallel and drink the cup of wine after Hallel. If this kind person who wants to help other people with their Sedarim wants to go to the other people's homes first before their own Seder, they can do so. They should say the brachot for those people and not eat or taste anything, and only then go home and make Kiddush. The Mishnah Berurah explains this further. The leaders should make Kiddush for them and say the bracha of Borei Pri Hagafen, say the bracha of Karpas for them, and say the Haggadah, and the bracha for the second cup of wine, and also the bracha of Hamotzi, and the brachot for eating matzah and maror. Even though normally with brachot on food and drink, we say that one cannot say the bracha for others unless one benefits from the food or drink oneself, the brachot for matzah at the Seder and the bracha of Kiddush are different because they are an obligation, and therefore one must say the brachot for others to fulfill their obligation even without eating or drinking oneself. Likewise, the bracha for Karpas is also considered a mitzvah, and one can say this for somebody else. Now, we've already found from the Shulchan Gavua that one can perhaps say the Haggadah before nightfall, whereas the Maharil says that one must tell the story of the Haggadah after nightfall. What then is the minimum Haggadah that one needs to do after nightfall to have fulfilled one's obligation? Now we know this because there's a Mishnah which tells us, and it's a famous Mishnah which we all know and is actually said at the Seder. Rabban Gamliel Haya Omer, Rabban Gamliel used to say, Kol shelo amar shloshat dvarim el b'Pesach lo yatsa yedei chovato. Anybody who does not say these things at the Pesach Seder has not fulfilled the obligation. Ve'elu hein, and these are they, Pesach, Matzah, Umaro. And then we have to explain them. Pesach, al shum she Pasach hamakom abate avotin b'Mitzrayim. The Pesach lamb is eaten on Pesach when we have our temple, because God, Pasach, He passed over the homes of our ancestors in Egypt. Matzah, we have the matzah, Ashum Shanik Alu Avotinu Mitzrayim, because our ancestors were redeemed from Egypt. Shenema, as it says, Vayafu et Abatek Asher Hotzim Mitzrayim Ugot Matot Kilo Chametz, and they left in such a hurry that they didn't have time to let their dough rise into bread, and they had to bake it into matzah. Maror, Ashum Shemeru Hamitzim Et Chai Avotinu Mitzrayim. We have bitter herbs because the Egyptians embittered our lives in Egypt. So this, with slight variations, is Rabban Gamliel in the Mishnah, and it is what we say in a slightly different form in the Seder. And Rabban Gamliel says, if you don't say that, you've not fulfilled your obligation, implying that if you do say it, you have fulfilled your obligation. And therefore, if you reserve this part of the Seder for after nightfall, we have done Haggadah, the recounting the story at nightfall. Then, of course, after that, we continue with Hallel, with eating matzah and maror, and so on. So this helps us, these two ideas together of the person making the Seder in other people's homes, and the fact that there's only a part of the Haggadah that has to be done at nightfall, helps us create a solution for people whom we may be helping to do the Seder at least partly before nightfall, because they're unable to do it after nightfall. And this is how it comes out. Of course, it's not ideal to do the Seder before nightfall, but if we need to help elderly or ill people have a Seder starting before nightfall, this is what we do. We make Kiddush after sunset, or if necessary, after Plak HaMincha. Sunset this year is 7:46, and Plak HaMincha is 6:42. The participants should wash their hands for karpas, or at least the leader. All the participants except the leader say the bracha of Borei Pri Hadamah and eat some vegetable, having in mind that the bracha will cover consumption of karpas and maror later on. The leader cannot say the bracha of Borei Pri Hadamah on behalf of the participants, because at this point there is not yet an obligation to say the bracha on karpas, because that can only be done at nightfall. Therefore, it is a simple bracha on eating, which one cannot say unless one's eating oneself. And since the leader at this point is not eating the karpas, the leader should leave it to the participants to say the bracha themselves and eat some karpas themselves. This at least preserves something of the order of the Seder, although the participants will have to eat some karpas later after nightfall, which is the proper time. The leader then does yachatz, puts away the afikoman. The leader says the Haggadah up to Rabbi Gamliel. At nightfall, the participants eat karpas. The leader says Rabbi Gamliel for them, and the following prayers, followed by the bracha of Borei Pri Hagafen, which the leader can say because it is an obligation at that point to drink wine. And then the participants drink the second cup of wine. They eat the matzah, the maror, the korech, and the meal, and proceed with the Seder in the usual way from nightfall. Having finished the Seder for others, the leader should then go through the whole Seder at the proper time after nightfall, beginning with Kiddush. We recall that even though the leader has said Kiddush and other bracha for others, that was just to help them, and the leader hasn't yet fulfilled their own obligation and could do so themselves in their own Seder. Similarly, if somebody is making an early Seder for themselves, they should follow a similar process. They should begin after Plak HaMincha or sunset, which is better, with Kiddush, then proceed with washing their hands, saying the bracha of Borei Pri Hadamah, eating some vegetables with the intent that the bracha should cover the karpas and maror they will eat later, breaking the middle matzah, putting the larger piece away, saying the Haggadah up to Rabbi Gamliel, and then continuing with Rabbi Gamliel from nightfall. If all that is absolutely out of the question, then they should at least defer Rabbi Gamliel and the things thereafter till after sunset, as there is a view that beyond sunset there is at least a possibility that it is already nightfall. However, this should only be relied on in extremis, as it is a weak position to take. So I hope we've done three things. Firstly, we've explained the situation regarding Zoom, and now we understand it. Secondly, we understand about helping other people or helping oneself if one can't delay Seder till nightfall for health or other very pressing reasons. And finally, we've also learnt some Torah. And Marbe Torah, Marbe Chaim, the more Torah, the more life. It is always a great thing to bring life to the world through learning Torah, and especially in this very hard time when lives are at stake, we support the world through Torah learning. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. I wish you all good health and a happy Pesach. Bye-bye.